What's up, nerds? Harbinger here with a mini video for today. We're going to talk about static variables. Not entirely convinced it's on the AP exam, but definitely an interesting topic and something you should know about anyway. I'm here with a special guest. Hopefully the flip video will go well.
It's been a great success.
Thank you, President Trump. So I agree, it's been a great success so far. You want to say a little something to my students?
And some, I assume, are good people.
That's true, some of them are good people. But anyway, let's get rolling. Let's do your daily meme. So, how do you say no to the meme, right? Didn't choose the thug life chose me. I can't tell if this is like me looking back in the day or me looking at some of you guys, but hey, that's us in a nutshell. So what are you gonna do? I'm feeling the whole shirt thing. I don't think a whole lot of people are feeling it, so we'll probably axe the shirt. Unless people feel super strong, we gotta have a computer science shirt going soon if we're going to have one at all. And I'm not entirely convinced the Thug Life reference would go in a computer science t-shirt, but I'm not entirely opposed either. So let's get rolling here. Talking about static variables. So the cool thing about static variables is they're like a variable that every single object in the class can have access to. So normally when you have a cat, so here's like a single cat, right? And it has a number of lives. So let's say like this one cat's lives are 9, and its name is like Mr. Meow. That's my cat. And his fur color is like black and white. And you know, he's neutered and he's meow, whatever. And then I've got this other cat, and he's got like 7 lives left. His name is Zippy. He's free to a good home. I'm dying to give him away to the 100th subscriber because I can't stand him, but that's not really a prize, it's a curse, so that's not happening. Zippy's got orange fur. He once ate a whole lot of string and had to have a lot of expensive surgery, which is why he's down to 7 lives. He's lucky to be alive right now. He's a delight, trust me. And then we've got this other cat named Kaiba. I didn't name him, my children did. He's so fat, he's like 23 pounds or something. He doesn't place anything in defense mode. He has no trap cards. That cat just lazily lays on the floor all day waiting for more food to be poured into the bowl. And he's gray. So that's what objects are like in classes, right? Objects, all cat objects, they have lives and they have names and they have fur color, and this one does too and this one does too. And they're all, it's called encapsulation. So the term here, let's see if I can get this down. Encapsulation means they all have their own data. It's called data hiding. And Mr. Meow has 9 lives. He's got a name. He's got a fur color. He's got a gender status. He's got a fixed status. And so does Zippy. And so does Kaiba. And their variables all have their own values. But what if there was a variable that they all could look at and they could all get its value? That would be kind of cool. So I'm going to do a student class instead. So public class student. So if you didn't know, you all have student ID numbers with the school. So maybe you've got like private string name, and maybe you've got private, I don't know, like address, add, or something like that. Maybe it's an address object, whatever. Private, oh gosh, date, DOB, like a date object for your date of birth, and you've got other things too. So that's cool and all, but you also have a private int student ID. But that implies that other people can have the same student ID as you. It kind of implies that like, hey, when we create a student ID, the very first student that ever was created was student, number 1. And then the next one was student number 2, the next student number 3. You have to keep track of whose student ID is what. And you have to set it appropriately. Otherwise, when you're in tester class and you're like, oh, student S1 equals new student, and you fill all the fields, oh my gosh, wait, what ID were we on again? Because I have to update that. And that's kind of cool, but at the same time, I wish there was a way that Java could keep track. And it can. So private static int, like master ID or something like that, or total ID, or I'm just going to call it ID. Let's call it global ID, because that seems like... And I'm going to start it off at 1,000. And what that means is every single student has a name, they have an address, they have a date of birth, they have a student ID, and they can all reference this one global ID. So that way, public student, and so here's my default constructor, and I could say something like name equals J Doe. Jane Doe, John Doe, doesn't really matter. The address is a new address. Whatever the default constructor is in the address class, it would assign it to that. So I also have to get a date of birth. So I'm going to do that. Date of birth equals new date. And I'm not sure what it is, but it would be parameterized correctly. And oh my gosh, how do I assign the global ID to the student ID? So what I do is I say student ID equals global ID. And then I have to increment global ID. That way the next student has a global ID, has a student ID that's one higher than the current student. So I'm going to do that. Let's see, global ID plus equals 1. And that way, when I make a student object, they absorb into their student ID field whatever the global ID is, and then it jumps up by 1 for the next one. So not horrible. We could do it with the parameterized constructor too, right? Like we could say something like, hey, what if I wanted to take in a string and call it N for name, and what if I want to take in an address? We'll call it A, and a date for the date of birth. Whoops. Date D. And what about, I don't want to take in an ID because it's already set. Right? Like I'm already going to handle that myself. So I think we're doing well so far.
Congratulations.
Thank you, President. Mr. President, sorry, I want to make sure I say that one correctly. Add equals A. We've got the date of birth equals D there coming in. And then same thing, hey, student ID is going to absorb whatever's up here. Excuse me. So, and then it's going to jump up by 1. So I don't want to fully parameterize it. That doesn't make sense, right? I don't want to take in, like, I don't say, oh, I've got this brand new student, and their name is whatever, and their address is whatever, their date of birth is whatever, and their student ID is whatever. I want their student ID to update automatically. With me so far?
Yeah.
So the president said, yeah. So you can have an accessor for it. You could have a mutator for it. You could have like a part of a toString that works. And this is also how a lot of massive databases manage their transaction IDs. Like if you look at your Wegmans receipt, it'll have a transaction ID, and they're all different. And that's because there is a kind of static variable that governs the transaction number. And every single time Wegmans or Walmart or Target or any other major retailer transacts, right? Anytime they make a transaction, they sell you something, you get a receipt with a different number on it. That's because it has this transaction ID number that's a static variable, and it assigns the student ID, or not the student ID, assigns the transaction ID for that one transaction to the global one, and it jumps up the global one. It's actually really cool. The funny thing is you have to be really careful because int can only hold so many things, and they have to manage their data correctly. So that's it on static variables. There's not a heck of a lot to show. If we were doing lists at this point, we'd be talking about like the grocery transaction or something like that, and how to manage the transaction number. But it's the same thing as a student number. It's just that all objects in a class can refer to the exact same variable, and they have the same value for it at a given time, even though their own personal variable is slightly different from each other. They can all look up and see, oh, there's this one global int that we all kind of can reference. The other thing I wanted to say was, again, be careful when writing static methods. A lot of you are doing a really, really, really good job, but when you have a static method that has a void return type, public static void, I don't know what it even does, let's call it mystery int n or something. So I don't even know what it does. So some of you are a big fan of this, like output here or something like that, you know? Or, hey, did you know the cube of n is n times n times n, or whatever. Please don't put system.out.printlns inside your static methods. They're called tracers, which I put them in all the time to make sure my methods are working correctly, but I always remove them or comment them out when I'm done. If you leave them in on the AP exam, it's considered a side effect, right? The method is doing something other than what you're told to do, right? You are outputting text on the
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Yeah, even President Trump appreciates it. We have to make sure that the method is doing exactly what they ask you to do. Hey, you take in an integer and process it somehow, some way. Even if this said int, same deal. You have an input, you care about the output, or you have an input and it does some kind of thing. Don't do anything other than what you're asked to do. So if you system.out.println, I'm the greatest person in the world, or hey, the method's all done, or hey, you're doing well so far, the AP exam will deduct 1 point from you. And since there's 4 problems, you could potentially lose 4 points out of 36. Seriously, that's a lot. And I don't want anybody to slip from immortality down to mortality because they decide to throw some SOPs in. So I know one of my classes is really good about it. One of my classes still needs a little bit more practice. And some of you are getting feedback on the Google Classroom like, hey, please don't put in SOPs inside methods. It's useful for when you're testing the code, but remove them, especially when you're handwriting it for the AP exam. All right, so like I said, mini lesson for today. Quarter's ending. Make sure all my stuff comes in soon. We don't have school Tuesday, or at least you don't have school Tuesday. We don't have school Friday, so everything is due before then. Everything is due that Thursday at the absolute latest. Please make sure stuff's coming in. A lot of my solutions are going online, so the second a solution goes up, everything else is frozen for that lab, so make sure your stuff comes in sooner rather than later. Shirt ideas, keep them coming. We're going to vote soon, and I get the sense that we're probably not going to do shirts because no one, except for a couple block 5s, are really clamoring for that. Other than that, hey, keep studying because static methods aren't going away. Harbinger out!